Hello students, in this video lecture we will discuss about the types of genetic disorders. As you all know, there are three types of genetic disorder. Number 1, single gene disorder. Number 2, chromosomal gene disorder, and number 3, multifactorial gene disorder. Single gene disorder, where a mutation affects one gene. Cystic fibrosis is an example of single gene disorder. Cystic fibrosis is a genetic disorder that affects the respiratory and digestive systems. People with cystic fibrosis inherit a defective gene on chromosome 7 called CFTR gene. The protein produced by this gene normally helps salts move in and out of cell. If the protein does not work correctly, that movement is blocked and an abnormally thick sticky mucus is produced on the outside of the cell. The cells most seriously affected by this are the lung cells. This mucus clogs the airways in the lungs and increases the risk of infection by bacteria. The thick mucus also blocks duct in the pancreas, so digestive enzymes can't get into the intestines. Galactosemia is another example of single gene disorder. Galactosemia is a rare disorder that affects the body's ability to break down a food sugar called galactose. The body breaks down lactose into galactose and glucose and uses these sugars for energy. Most people with galactosemia are missing an enzyme called GALT that helps further break down galactose. Defects in galactose metabolism cause toxic chemicals to build up in the cells of the body. Sickle cell disease is another example of single gene disorder. Sickle cell disease is a disorder that affects the red blood cells, which uses a protein called hemoglobin to transport oxygen from the lungs to the rest of the body. Normally, red blood cells are round and flexible, so they can travel freely through the narrow blood vessels. The hemoglobin molecules has two parts, an alpha and an beta. Patients with sickle cell disease have a mutation in a gene on chromosome 11 that codes for the beta subunit of the hemoglobin proteins. As a result, hemoglobin molecules don't form properly, causing red blood cells to be rigid and have a concave shape like a sickle. The second type of genetic disorder is chromosomal gene disorder. Chromosomal disorders where chromosomes or a part of chromosomes are missing or changed. Down syndrome is the example of chromosomal gene disorder. Down syndrome is a developmental disorder caused by an extra copy of chromosome 21, which is why the disorder is also called trisomy 21. Having an extra copy of this chromosome means that individuals has 3 copies of each of its genes instead of 2, making it difficult for cells to properly control how much protein is made. Producing too much or too little protein can have serious consequences. People with Down syndrome have very distinct facial features like a flat face, a small broad nose, abnormally shaped ears, a large tongue, and upward slanting eyes with small folds of skin in the corners. People with Down syndrome have an increased risk of developing a number of medical problems like respiratory infections, GIT obstruction, leukemia, heart defects, hearing loss, hypothyroidism, and various eye abnormalities. No cure exists for Down syndrome, but physical therapy and or a speech therapy can help people with the disorder develop more normally. Klinefelter syndrome is another example of chromosomal gene disorder. Klinefelter syndrome is a genetic condition caused when someone has two X chromosomes and one Y chromosome. Because people with an XXY chromosome arrangements have a Y chromosome, they are considered genetic males. Most XXY individuals develop as males, often not knowing they have an extra chromosome. XXY is usually caused by what is called non Disjunction. Non-disjunctions happens when a pair of sex chromosomes fail to separate during egg formation. The XXY chromosomes arrangement affects primary sexual development. Typically, testes don't fully develop, and the levels of hormone testosterone, which is important for male sexual reproduction, are lower than average. As adult, nearly all XXY males are unable to make sperm and so cannot have biological children. Many men discover their condition only after they seek medical help for infertility. Turner syndrome is another example of chromosomal gene disorder. Turner syndrome is caused by a missing or incomplete X chromosomes. People who have Turner syndrome develop as females. The gene affected are involved in growth and sexual development, which is why girls with the disorder are shorter than normal and have abnormal sexual characteristics. Now, the third type of genetic disorder is multifactorial gene disorder. Multifactorial gene disorder is a complex disorder where there are mutations in two or more genes. Often lifestyle and environment also play a role. Alzheimer's disease Alzheimer's disease is an example of multifactorial gene disorder. Alzheimer's is a disease that causes dementia or loss of brain function. It affects the part of the brain that deals with memory, thoughts, and language. The brain of a person with Alzheimer's contains abnormal clump of cellular debris and proteins called plaque and collapsed microtubules which support structure of the cell. Microtubules disintegration is caused by a malfunctioning protein called tau which normally stabilize the microtubules. In Alzheimer's patients, tau protein instead cluster together to form disabling tangles. These plaques and tangles damage the healthy cells around them. Because Alzheimer's destroys brain cells, people who have the disorder slowly lose their ability to think clearly. At first, they may forget words or names or have trouble finding things. As the disorder worsens, they may forget how to do simple tasks.